Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, so you were talking real quick about your film, and this is the Heart of Africa.
Heart of Africa.
Okay. What else are you
So,
going to do to preview it? There's the one in Idaho, or two in Idaho?
right. Well, we've already had the release. The release is, we released on, we had the big premiere on March 11th at Jordan Commons, and then that was kind of a VIP premiere. And then on March 13th was the big one, and we got maybe 6 days before COVID closed the theaters down. But the biggest thing was we kickstarted cinema in the Congo, and that was not our first goal when we started working on this back in 2014 or so. But as we started seeing things a little bit more clearly, like what are we really doing, and what we also know is that it's not that we're fitting into a design that a great architect has done. Yeah. So we just figure out where our little
you're building as you go. Yeah.
Right. And then it became very clear in about 2017 that we were going to be in the Congo, that we were going to film in the Congo, that we were going to use a Congolese team, and everything that happened after that was just miraculous. I'm actually hearing from our director right now. What?
Okay. So how did your project actually start? Tell me about that.
So my husband and I were in an MTC branch, French speaking, which was a huge surprise to me because I don't speak French, but I'm fluent in Spanish.
Right.
But we sent these young men to various French speaking countries, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, which I had just the most limited knowledge of, but I also recognized that was going to be a hard mission. So initially I wrote to all of the missionaries we had in the MTC. I sent weekly emails, but then after a few months, I honed it down to just the kids who were serving in the DR Congo. And I wrote to them and their companions. And one of them, Henry Lizowski, asked me at one point to write to one of their group members, Emimbui, and he said he's got a really interesting story. He used to be in a revolutionary group. And he said, Emmy, his family doesn't have internet. So when all of us are at the internet cafe, he just waits in the corner. It would be so nice if he could communicate with someone while the rest of us are doing this.
Oh, wow.
So I started writing to Emmy, and he told me a bit about his past. After his mission, he told me even more. And it was fascinating to me. And we continued writing, and I scripted the first draft of our movie and then flew there in 2014 because Emmy was getting married. And I actually had been a bit of a part of that. Well, I'll maybe tell you the whole story and you can edit out anything.
Absolutely, I'm listening.
So Emmy really wanted to go to a university in the United States. There are real problems with universities in Congo. Corruption is just a huge issue. Right. And professors don't make very much money. And so it's very common for a professor to use bribery. I will give you a certain grade, but I will need some compensation for that.
Right.
Emmy just really hated that. So he wanted to go to BYU Hawaii. And then he was admitted, and even with a scholarship. And I helped him. I did some of the letters that he needed. And then about a month later, I got a note from him saying, I guess I'm not accepted. And it was a letter from a committee that I think somebody did it without realizing how strong the implications were, and also without realizing that he had an advocate. Yeah. So it said, we have come to recognize that students from Africa have different, I've got the whole thing somewhere. That there are cultural realities that don't fit in with BYU Hawaii. And yeah.
In the letter, it said that in the letter?
It said it in the letter. And my first thought was, you didn't get this checked before you sent it. Because you realize how really damaging this is. Yeah. So, and I did have a few little connections. One of my dear friends.
That is an understatement, but okay.
One of my friends had been the legal counsel for BYU Hawaii. Yeah. And I also used a general authority who knew Emmy, who had met Emmy in Kinshasa. And I sent them, this is what they just said, and both of them called. So it became, I don't know everything that happened there. I was not in the loop of what happened in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But they finally said to Emmy, we would like to accept you, but you need to be married before you can come. There was a sort of a sense of, if we accept a Congolese, he's probably going to marry an American, and then he'll stay in the United States. And their idea was that we have to have young people who are going to return to their countries. So this was an interest. Yeah, I have no idea if BYU. I have. No
I'm
idea.
like completely. I don't want to say shocked, but shocked is probably the right word.
Yeah.
You know, being that I grew up on that campus as a little kid, and then everybody goes there. I didn't realize there was an expectation that if you come, you will also return to your country. Yeah. I mean, I've seen church programs where that's the initiative.
Yeah. So with Emmy, his next note to me was, well, I guess I will marry someone else because I can't marry the girl I love, Steffi, because her father says she's too young. So I guess if I'm going to get an American education, I need to find someone else to marry. And I said, well, that will be your choice. And then the very next day he said, Margaret, I can't. I love Steffi. I will give up my education for her. And
I'm relieved.
that was a huge thing for Steffi. That was the really big thing.
Yeah.
That said, this man loves you. He really loves you.
Yeah.
So he wrote a fascinating response to BYU Hawaii and said, you have given me an impossible choice. I either I marry somebody who I don't love, or I give up what you've offered me and marry the woman I love. And I've chosen to marry the woman I love. So,
wow. Okay, so, and that there is a love story in and of itself.
It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I flew with Dana Gerald, who was helping with our early steps in Heart of Africa, to Congo, and we attended the various wedding ceremonies for Emmy and Steffi. I brought a wedding dress with me. It was hugely discounted so that I could bring it to Steffi, and it was just gorgeous. I can send you pictures.
Oh, I would love it.
Okay. So then we had the ceremonies in Kinshasa, and then we were going to fly to South Africa to do the temple ceremony there. And we went to the embassy to get the visa, and it looked like everything was great. And then Emmy opened the envelopes that they had given him, and they had said that he could not go to South Africa. So I said, well, see if you can go to Ghana. So he went to the Ghana embassy, and
he's cleared?
He was cleared, yeah. So he and Steffi flew to Ghana. Dana and I met them there. There were some really lovely little side things that happened, where I had a friend who had met me earlier when we were doing the play about Jane Manning James called I Am Jane, and she said, I'm supposed to meet you. And I thought, well, okay, periodically, sometimes that means that they're going to say, I've got a 500 page book for you to read. And so I was a little,
Girl, are you sure?
And then she mentioned that she had lived in the Congo. She'd been a missionary in the Congo, and I heard that. And she told me about this remarkable man who they had sponsored to come to the United States, and he was back there and had amazing experiences. And I said, well, how close is, he lived in Ivory Coast. I said, how close is Ivory Coast to where I'm going to be in Kinshasa? And she said, oh, you won't meet him. It's really far. And then later she said, actually, he's going to go to Rwanda to get names for temple work. And I said, how close is Rwanda to where I'm going to be?
Yeah.
And she said, no, it's very far. You won't be able to meet him. And then finally, when we realized we were going to Ghana, she said that he was going to go to Ghana to do the temple work for the people he had gotten the names for in Rwanda. And I said, when is he going to be in Ghana? And it was, of course, the exact time that I was going to be there. So I called Emmy and Steffi from where I still hadn't arrived. I just called to see how things were, because I had arranged for them to stay at patron housing. And he said, it's wonderful. We love the people. They have separate places for men and for women.
Yeah.
And I thought, you've been married for 2 days and you're in separate rooms.
I know.
And I said, okay, when I get there, you go to the hotel. I go to patron house.
Yeah.
So I went to patron housing, and the entire state from the Ivory Coast that this man, my friend, told me about, was a member of, were there in patron housing. So I got really well acquainted with this whole state from the Ivory Coast. I got to hear Fireside as when I was a part of them, and I got to talk with this man that I had heard about from my friend. For after the Fireside, we were up a couple of hours just next to the temple talking about sacred things. It was just a really special thing.
I mean, it's like the whole world rearranged itself to just put you where you needed to be.
That's, yeah, that was sure what it felt like.
Yeah.
That's what I am seeing it all the time now, maybe because I have a larger perspective, but I'm just seeing all the time that whenever things seem to be going terribly, it's, you don't know the design. You don't know the design. Move forward, just keep moving.
Just keep going.
And times when it just seems like everything, there is no way that this project can possibly go forward. And the moment, because there was a time where we thought Heart of Africa could not possibly go forward. And I had one of the most sacred experiences of my life in the temple, where the impression was so clear. And I was filled with gratitude instead of resentment, because everything had fallen apart. Everything had fallen apart. And the message was, you're not finished. Be grateful for what you've learned. This continues. And I had no idea how it was going to continue, but I was literally filled with gratitude, as though my cells had been filled with gratitude. And, you know, I tried a few little stabs as well, what about this, and then it became very clear what we were going to do. And then it's very clear that this was always what we were supposed to do. But I needed to know more. And Chopin, who we were going to pair with, needed to be better prepared. But once it was clear what we were going to do, everything fell into place. That doesn't mean that it suddenly became easy.
No.
It became harder, but we understood what we were doing.
Right. Yeah, and actually being able to clearly see where you're trying to step is better than a lot of things in life. Clarity is better than a lot of things.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the significance of meeting this man who came to do the work in Ghana. What was the significance there? Who is he?
So he was raised in the Congo. He is Congolese, but his life had been threatened in the Congo, named Wisman Kabango. And I honestly don't know, but that the evening where we just talked together, I don't know everything that the Lord has in mind for that one. That ended with the conversation, and then, you know, we went with Emmy and Steffi to see the slave castle in Elmina. I just know that for some reason Wisman was supposed to meet me there, and that one that hasn't played out. I have lots of threads in my life that haven't played out, and we'll just wait and see.
Right. Okay. So then, how do you get this project started? Where does the story start to form into something that you say, okay, we're making a movie?
We had the story, and we'd worked with some marvelous filmmakers. So the script still needed some work, but we had it. I sent it to Chopin and said, read this, and if you like it, then we'd like to have you do it. And he read it and said, I love it. Yes, I want to do it. So the next thing was money, and we had very little. So some grants, we did a couple of fundraising things, but ultimately, I asked my husband how he would feel about taking out a loan on our home. And he said, and he's extremely frugal. I was pretty sure the answer would be no.
No.
He said, actually, our home was paid off last month. Yeah, we can do that. So we did. And that meant that we could provide equipment to them in the Congo. This is not the best way to make a movie, taking out a loan on your home, but we were actually in a position where we could. And it wasn't for the full value of our home, but it was, you know, we chose to get a very small home, so we weren't indebted up to our ears. And the fact that it was free and clear at the time when we needed money was a really lovely little benefit.
Right.
So we got the loan and then started buying equipment. I worked with Chopin to he told me the sorts of things he needed, and everybody took equipment. My brother took cameras, I took lighting, the American actors we sent took computers. And they in the Congo had equipment, but it just wasn't the kind of equipment they would need to do the project we were working on. And because we chose an LDS themed movie, Chopin was not LDS at the time that we brought him into the project. He became LDS, but not because of anything we did. We were careful to not proselytize because we don't want to mix business with proselytizing. And this was, a film, not a missionary experience. But he had some dreams that persuaded him that he should find out more about the gospel. And one of the people who taught him was the man whose story inspired our film, Emi Mbui, who I had gone to Ghana with and whose wedding ceremony I'd seen. So Emi was one of his teachers, and Emi's brother-in-law baptized Chopin. So yeah, it was a huge experience, part one. And then part two, we were also doing oral histories. So I was looking at the real issues in the Congo, one of which is literacy. And the fact that it's two main obstacles to literacy. Number one, education is paid for. If you're poor, you can't get an education. You have to have enough money to pay. And part two is books disintegrate. So there are not libraries. There are not great libraries where you can just put books. And so I thought, well, let's teach bookbinding so that they can create their own. So I learned how to do bookbinding so that I could teach it to them. And I was looking at how do we do the glue? And I found out all the ways that we could make things there, which is the most important thing with any kind of humanitarian service. It has to be replicable. So I was teaching bookbinding, and I took the oral history of Chopin's parents. And his mother's story was just so beautiful. Her mother died giving birth to Celestine. Chopin's mother's name Celestine. Her mother died giving birth. She was the daughter of a chief. There was some tribal instance. She was running away from certain death because of tribal issues.
Got it.
And went into labor and delivered the baby and died. And Celestine was raised for the first 7 years of her life by grandparents and by an aunt, Mama Kafua. And she left that area and didn't see the grandparents or Mama Kafua for the next 40 years. So we had Chopin in the place that we do a lot of our work called Loja. And he was just the part he told us about the dreams that he had that led him to find out about the gospel and be baptized. And he got a phone call letting him know that Mama Kafua, his mother's aunt, who he had never met, was there in that town where we were. And we did not know that. He thought that she was in another town that was some distance away. And this town was a 3-hour flight from Kinshasa. So there was a wide distance.
A huge chance that you'd never ever cross paths.
And to find out that she was there. And then we had to get a translator because the aunt,
different dialects,
Pela, and Chopin doesn't speak it. So we reunited them, which was just a beautiful thing. She was weeping throughout to be reunited with this woman's son, the woman who she had raised, this orphaned little girl who she had raised. And then my determination was, now we have to reunite Celestine, the mother, with Mama Kafua. So I arranged to get some money. I sold some things. and I knew exactly what I needed. I knew how much flights passed from Kinshasa to Loja. And we had that. It was, a year ago, last April, where I had the money, and we managed to get Celestine and Chopin's wife, Deborah, and Chopin. And that we've got the reunion filmed where she's coming. Celestine sees her aunt, and it's the most emotional, just weeping. And then she gives a prayer that I couldn't understand, but it was just divine connection, just saying, thank you, God. I did not think this would happen. I have prayed for it, and I didn't think this would happen. But here we are reunited. I'm in the place where my family is. So that, and the things is, so which was more important? Was it more important to get Chopin as the director of this film, or was it more important to reunite that family? What are the implications of both? And I don't know that either is more important than the other. But, right time, right place, and all of a sudden you see, oh my goodness, here I am, and this is exactly right.
And heaven and earth shifting to make it all come together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So now what's the plan with the movie?
So the movie, apparently there will be a small further theatrical release in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And then the DVD comes out in July. But we've also, because we took it from a 4-hour film to a 90-minute film with really, that's one of the big things in getting a film so that it's in good shape is the brutal editing that has to happen. But we edited out a huge part of the American missionary story. So we have now made a second film, just an hour film called Companions that tells his story. And we already had the footage for it. We added a few little things, but we've got it. So we have those two, and then we're in process of working on a film about Patrice Lumumba, who was the first prime minister in the Congo.
He has a difficult story. That is a story about Patrice Lumumba. It's just full of struggle.
And more, even if you look at the international complications. So he was born in the area where we did our work, in the area where Chopin met his aunt. That's where Patrice Lumumba was born. He was also a Tetela speaker, like Chopin's aunt. And that became interesting, when I had a sense that we need to tell the Lumumba story, and moved into it and realized, oh, we're set for this. We know this area. This is where we do our work. This is his language. And one of the priests I work with, we work with Catholic priests and nuns, sent me a letter, and I looked at his name because I had started researching Lumumba and realized that's Lumumba's father's family name. And I wrote back to the man and said, tell me about your name, because Lumumba has the same name. Are you related? And he said, yes, we are cousins. My father knew him very well. They were born in the same year, 1925. So then we got stories from him about Lumumba that jived perfectly well with what I was researching, but were also from somebody who grew up with him in that village. The stories had remained, even though the man himself had died. One of the big things, though, is that in the Congo during these years, you have all of these enormous resources: oil, diamonds, every mineral, and uranium. In a mine called the Shinkolobwe mine, which is in the Katanga province of Congo. 96% of the uranium that was used for the atomic bomb came from the Congo, came from the Shinkolobwe mine. And so when I plugged that in, when I was doing the research and I heard Malcolm X say, Patrice Lumumba is the greatest Black man ever to walk on the African continent, that, he was killed because they wanted the minerals. And I thought, I don't think you even knew, because, Malcolm X was killed in, 62? 64, the early 60s. Lumumba was assassinated in 61. So we've got these very turbulent 60s. But I thought, I don't think you even knew. It was uranium.
It was
The reason that Lumumba became a target was the whole world is at stake here. And I don't know that Lumumba did. In our screenplay, he does find out about the uranium and what it does and what its power is. But the concern that the Americans had that the Russians would
find it and take it.
Right. And so it's a race. One of the things that was mandated, according to one of the CIA people who was there in Congo, Larry Devlin, was the execution of Lumumba. And it was not carried out by the Americans or the Belgians. The tribal violence was used. And so the tribe that executed Lumumba was an enemy tribe to his tribe. But it was overseen, and there was complicity from Americans and Belgians. And he died by firing squad on January 17th, 1961.
He's so heavy. Tell me this, what caught your eye about Patrice Lumumba in the first place, that you wanted to start looking into him and researching his life and putting together his story?
Well, I didn't, the first time I flew into Lodja, I knew who Lumumba was just in the basics. I find that most young people don't know his name, which I think we need to change that. But flying into the airport in Lodja and seeing all of the pictures of Lumumba, I asked the priest I was working with, Abbé Véron, so I saw pictures of Lumumba, and he said, well, yes, he's from this area. He's our native son. So that was interesting. Trying to remember what really there must have been some article that caught me, and then that led me into obsessive research, which is kind of how I do things.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what it was, but honestly, I feel like the timing again is such that just a few weeks ago, the statue of Leopold II was taken down in Belgium. He was the ruler who decimated the Congo.
Yes.
He approved of punishments that resulted in the genocide of 10 million Congolese and that many elephants because they were taking ivory tusks. So Leopold was a brutal, brutal ruler. And the fact that within the past month, statues of him in Belgium were taken down and attention is being paid to Lumumba. Yesterday was the anniversary of independence for the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was Belgian Congo. And then on June 30th, 1960, it became independent Congo. And now it's the Democratic Republic of Congo and also across the river, the Republic of Congo. Yes. So just the interesting timing of it, where we are right here at this moment, where the Black Lives Matter movement has gone international, and part of it was addressing King Leopold II and what that was. I believe that yesterday, the King of Belgium, June 30th, 2020, the King of Belgium made a second apology for what Belgium had done in the Congo, the genocide that it had committed.
Really?
Yeah.
Because what little research I was able to do during the time from the last time we spoke, there was a huge resistance to let the Congolese be independent. It was, the Belgians didn't seem to want that at all. It was it felt like it was offensive to them to even be seen or on equal footing with them.
That was a huge thing. When King Baudouin was at the independence celebration on June 30th, 1960, and said it was the genius of Leopold II, which resulted in the liberation of the Congo, and this was always the idea that you would be independent. And then Patrice Lumumba, in an unscheduled speech, got up and said, "We have endured barbarous actions. We have endured the insults of the Belgians, but from here on, we are equal." Well, within a week, there were riots throughout the Congo. And the biggest thing, the province where the uranium is found is the Katanga province. And Belgium declared that that still belonged to them. Maybe the rest of the Congo could be independent.
Could be independent, but not
Katanga,
there.
which had all of, the rich in mining, everything, but that uranium really caught my eye. So there was a huge battle. Lumumba flew to the United Nations, to New York City, met with Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the Secretary General of the UN, to talk about Belgium's insistence that Congo was still theirs. We'll give back the rest, but the richest one, we're holding on to that. That's independent. That's an independent Belgian state.
Interesting.
So that became part of, and that was the province where Patrice Lumumba was killed.
So what is the fate of that province today? Do you know?
What I've understood from talking to various ambassadors is that the uranium is still mined, but secretly. There are various powers that have access to it throughout the world. It's not in, none of the Congo is in great shape. So Lumumba is assassinated. In 1961, Mobutu becomes the head of state, and one of his first acts,
some leadership skills there.
He's a tyrant, and one of his first acts is to publicly execute 50 men. And he fills a stadium to have this public execution. That is kind of a prophecy of the kind of ruler he will be. And what he does is disastrous. The level of corruption is utterly disastrous. And it leaves the Congo, by the time we get the next two presidents, Laurent Kabila and Joseph Kabila, where the distribution of the wealth is to the little oligarchs and through nepotism with the families of the very rich. So by 2020, Congo is listed in the bottom 3 of the poorest nations on earth. This province, this country that is probably the richest in all the world in natural resources, it will be
bottom 3.
Usually the Central African Republic and the Democratic Republic of Congo are right there tied for the poorest on earth. The huge irony of that.
Yeah, I remember I have my youngest son, he's 11 now. So he was maybe 3 or 4 months before I met some of the people from Taifi. And they were saying, well, one of the things we want to do is help establish infrastructure in the Congo.
Yep.
And that had been the first that had ever really like, you can hear about a lot of things without having anything show up on your radar. And that was the first I heard. And so now tell me about your efforts now. What are you wanting to do? Because you're not doing infrastructure,
yes,
but you are doing.
We are doing infrastructure. Yeah, we just and we're working with Robert and Angie Workman with the people who they've trained. So with the Typee Foundation, one of the people we're working with, David Erickson, was trained with Typee and Goal Zero, and now works for a company called Ironwood. But they have a solar mini grid that can power an entire village. Robert and Angie with Typee have gone to whole villages and lit them up. It's a Light a Village initiative.
Yes.
So
is it Typee, or am I saying it wrong? I apologize if I'm saying it wrong.
It's Typee, but mostly.
But we both know what we're talking about. Yes.
Right. The big thing for us is that they helped us.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've connected us to people that continue to help us. My husband and I submitted 2 grants yesterday that involve, trying to get this solar mini grid to power a place that will become a film studio and a university eventually, but also at the university where we work in Loja, which doesn't have running water, it doesn't have electricity. There's one solar panel that I brought from Goal Zero, Robert and Angie's company, and it works well, but that's all they have, and it only serves to charge phones. If we're going to do things like make possible international instruction, make internet connection possible, not just with cell phones, but with laptops that work. Southern Utah University donated 40 Chromebooks, but we don't have a router to make those Chromebooks work. So they're still in envelopes. They're still in envelopes in Loja. And so our thing was, okay, we know what we have. Now, how do we actually make a difference?
Yes.
So yeah, we are working with infrastructure. When I've gone to many third world countries with my dad, who was a linguist. And after my first trip to Congo, when I came back, I said, that is the most third of any third world country I've ever been to. Because it was, I've been to places where I had to go to a well for water and where there wasn't electricity, but I had never seen the level of poverty. And Chopin saw even more, because when he came with his mother to film the reunion of the aunt, they also went to the tiny, tiny village where the mother is buried. And I was told that was not something Americans should do. That basically it was, this is too hard for you. Just Congolese can do this, so don't go. So I didn't. And Chopin, Celestine, and Deborah did. And they fell down multiple times. There are really no roads. And they took motorcycles. And when they returned, Chopin, who is just such a dear man, said, Margaret, I can never be rich. What I saw in that area, we have clothes in Kinshasa. They don't even have clothes. We have to help. We have to do something to help. So that little village is on our radar too. And we just follow whatever light comes. But that, it's on. I know the Catholic priest who works there, and we are just thinking, when we do this, and it's always when we go to Loja, we light them up, and then we go to Lowell so that we can address the things that Chopin saw, and from then we help them set up their own communities.
I know that the vision for the future can change. You might want something today, and it might have to change tomorrow, right? But what do you see happening? What is the objective of all your efforts?
I see the rise of the Congo. What I've said is we're bringing Lumumba back. We're just going to say, well, we had a really unfortunate 60 years, but we're going back. And may I introduce you to Patrice Lumumba. He was your prime minister, and we're bringing him back so that he can remind you of who you are and what the objectives are, what the goals are, not just for Congo, but for all of Africa, because he was a Pan-Africanist. And the rest of it is, now we want to hear your stories, and your stories matter desperately, and so we're filming them. When we showed Heart of Africa in the Congo, it was their language, their people, directed by their team. So basically, we are doing everything we can to catalyze what you already have. You already have your stories. You've been traumatized by war. You've been traumatized by people stealing from you, by the corruption that has prevented supplies from getting to you. And there are ways to take care of that. So the integrity of the people we work with is supreme. Chopin is an absolutely honest man. And we move forward with the sense that we are not going to fall for that. The big line that Chopin says, I've watched him, I've been with him when people have tried to attack tribes, and he said, The biggest problem with my country is corruption. I'm not going to help my country fall. If I give in to corruption, I take my country down, and I'm not going to do that. The country will rise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, there's something that now you have said to me, I think at least 3 times, possibly 4, because you might have said it twice in a different conversation, but you keep saying you want to bring Lumumba back. What was it about Lumumba what is it that you want to bring back? What specific thing or what part of his vision are you trying to like reignite in the people?
And by the way, he's a problematic character because he is accused of being a communist. That's because when he went to the United States, he was turned down for what he needed, and Russia was eager to help, and he accepted that. And that's one of the things we deal with. But for me, it starts with his birth in this tiny little village called Onaloa, where they spoke only Tetela. He didn't learn French until he was a teenager, but he's born very poor, born a farmer. And there's Belgian rule in that area, in Onaloa. He goes to a school that is run by Belgians. It's Belgian Congo at the time. But he has a sense that he matters. So he challenges teachers. He becomes a rather difficult. He's known, even some Tetela names that he's given indicate that he's difficult.
Yes.
That he's not somebody who's easily cowed. So he leaves his home area and goes to a larger city, takes evening classes to become educated not only in politics, but in French. He becomes fluently eloquent in French and writes poetry that is just sublime.
Right.
And from then starts meeting with people to establish an independence movement. He's a part of something called the Association de Évoluer, the Evolved Society. Mm-hmm. And then he makes mistakes. That's part of his story, is that he's flawed. You know, he's not going to be perfect, and we're not going to paint him as a perfect person. But the vision that he has and the speeches that he gives are all about Pan-Africanism, and how unless we work together, we are not going to succeed. So the fact that he talks about the dangers of tribalism and says, referring to Belgium, they are trying to agitate tribalism. That's how they will conquer us, is that they can get us to fight amongst ourselves. Right. So, of course, the tribalism is used in Lumumba's execution.
It's completely weaponized. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, I mean, it felt like, again, from what little research I was able to do, people were really ignited by his speech that, no, we are independent. We've suffered long enough, and now this is us, and we're at the table.
It's not just the Congo, it's worldwide. So when this kid from, he's just 35 when he dies. So, he's the age of one of my children when he's executed. But he has commandeered a plane at the Kinshasa airport to go to New York, and he is ready to meet with people. He wants to meet with Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. Eisenhower has left for whatever reason, and so he doesn't meet with him. But he is greeted as a diplomat, as the president, the prime minister of the Congo. He goes to the United Nations, addresses the United Nations, has conversations with Dag Hammarskjöld, and we have a record of the letters between the two. And Lumumba does not hesitate to demand things. He is, he's part of this entire movement. Dr. King, Malcolm X, all of that is one global movement thing that we need to rise up and take the stand of who we actually are. Yeah. And so he's doing that in Africa, and he's in Ghana speaking to the African Association with Kwame Nkrumah, who is also talking about Pan-Africanism and the ideal of Africa cooperating enough that they are moving as one entity, that it's the entire African continent with all of its resources who are claiming power. And he speaks in a conference in Nigeria, not South Africa, because we've got apartheid.
Yes.
But he's all over Africa, and the world is noticing. So when word comes of his death, initially, surprise, surprise, it says, well, he escaped from prison and he was shot when he was escaping. Well, no, we actually have the rather detailed accounts of how he was executed.
Where did those accounts come from?
There are cables, there are telegrams that talk about it. And then we have the people after the fact, like Larry Devlin, who talk about what they knew and when they knew it. Devlin got word that Lumumba was being transferred. What that actually meant was that they were going to kill him.
That was the time, yeah.
And he had already understood that his order was to take him out. He had actually been given poison toothpaste to administer to Lumumba. But he didn't, that's in his own book where he talks about what he did in the Congo. But he never gave the poison toothpaste to Lumumba, but he was aware. When he received that telegram, he's being transferred. He knew what that meant, and he waited for 3 days before reporting it to anyone. So a report from the CIA said that implicates the United States, that there was knowledge of what was happening and nothing was done, that he was a dignitary who needed to be protected and nothing was done. So the particular conference where it's addressed in the CIA, they say America needs to apologize to the Democratic Republic of Congo for its interference. Belgium has done it and did it again yesterday on the 30th.
That's interesting. You've said so many things where I'm like, that kind of sounds like classic CIA, and the way that, yes. But I will leave CIA stuff alone. So I know Lumumba was shot, but why was his body then destroyed after the fact?
To prevent evidence. If they're going to create a story that he escaped from prison, it's not going to look good if they dig up his body and see that there are multiple gunshot wounds and where they are, and indicating that it was execution style or that it was firing squad. So the order comes, apparently a Belgian order, that the bodies are to be cut up and destroyed in acid.
Yeah.
Right. So if you see Raoul Peck's movie about Lumumba, which starts with the
destruction, the retrieval of the bodies, and then destruction.
It starts with that. And if you don't have a context, you have no idea what's going on there. But that's the bodies are being destroyed. It's Lumumba and two of his friends who are shot together. And so the idea was that the narrative would be he ran away. Gosh, what could we do? We shot him. It was his fault. Did we ever see that when? Oh, that person was not an angel. So we shot him. So the narrative about Lumumba is that he was a communist and he was trying to escape from prison. So why should we be sorry that
he's dead?
And the global reaction to that was enormous. I'm guessing it was far beyond what anybody had. You have enormous protests in the United States, in New York City, people carrying the pictures and words Lumumba. You have protests throughout Europe. You have protests in Cuba. Che Guevara goes to Congo a little bit later, but Cuba is agitated. They've been watching the Lumumba saga. And so there's great agitation, but throughout the world, if you look at protests in other parts of the world, Lumumba protests, we'll finish our movie with pictures of the protests throughout the world. And so this man from a tiny, tiny little village in Congo has a global impact at age 35 when he's assassinated.
Wow. Here's the thing. Now it's on me to learn what I need to learn, right? But how is that not part of popular history? Because you even mentioned, where did it fall out? How did it go silent? Do you have any idea where people just stopped talking about it?
Honestly, it has surprised me that people don't know his name. When I've mentioned his name with this project, I've been genuinely surprised. The fact that it has been coming up. A Facebook friend, is not somebody I've actually met in person, but he's in Belgium and does amazing work. I think he's also a filmmaker. The picture that he put on Facebook yesterday was an angel with Lumumba's face. So again, we're recording this on the 1st of July. Yesterday, June 30th, was Independence. So Lumumba came out again yesterday, and he will come out again on January 17th, because that will be the anniversary of his execution. So we're in a time where he's coming back. And for many, it's the time where he's appearing. They've never heard of him before. So we're going to let that story be heard. And I don't know how that happened, that we should have Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Patrice Lumumba and other leaders. Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana should also be remembered. And that's a name that I didn't even know. As I researched, I found all sorts of people who we really should remember, but we don't.
I'm actually, I really do wonder how it kind of fell out of just being known, because I've heard of the idea of Pan Africa for basically when I moved to the mainland and I was not in Hawaii. Like that's it. When American history was a little bit different when I got to the mainland, but I did, just the idea and knowing that Pan Africa would be a very powerful. Well, it's a powerful idea. If you have that many people moving together, I mean, you take over the world, and I see the fear that comes from
the resources on that continent. The fact that we have the president of the Congo, who I have hope in, Tshisekedi is his name. He's the new president, and he has reached out to other African nations saying, "Can we cooperate?" If that could happen, it would be a world changer. Right now, sadly, there are some African countries that have earned the reputation for being scammers. Nigeria is so sad because it is a magnificent nation, but scamming is listed as number 3 in careers. And that's, the fact that dishonesty is taking over where there could be such power backed by such resources to change the world for the better is supremely ironic and tragic.
Yeah. I do see a lot of movement with Nigerians that are here in the United States wanting to make a difference and actually building platforms here that allow them to go back. And so that I mean, there's at least hope, but there is, wow, there's always hope everywhere. Yeah. Wow. My mind is blown over all of this because the limited research, again, I didn't get what you're telling me now. It's kind of a beautiful thing. So then what's the next?
It's been my arc too. I didn't know it at the beginning. I was well into the research before I realized uranium, atomic bomb, and then started researching specifically about that and how all of that came to be. But I did find documentaries made by very conservative organizations that referred to Lumumba as a communist and communist Lumumba and his cronies.
Cronies.
So the wide brush of, at that time, and we're seeing it again, we're seeing the broad brush of socialism, communism, again becomes something we can paint people with and then dismiss them. And with Lumumba, the accusation that he was a communist socialist, which he was asked specifically, "Are you a communist?" And he smiles and says, "I'm a nationalist." Basically, I want my country
to succeed.
Yes, yeah. But the narrative of him being a communist is still being circulated. That didn't stop.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. So what is the next step from here for your project?
We have to get money. We have to get money. So we've got grant proposals. We submitted 2 yesterday.
Yeah.
One for the film itself, one for infrastructure, so that we can, if you consider when Chopin and his team were trying to make movies, they would schedule a night when they would meet to talk about scripts and what needed to happen for the nights when electricity would be available in the neighborhood, which meant once weekly. And they would bring their laptops and charge them on site. The electricity would go on. I don't remember if it was an electrical grid or a generator. For a lot of us, the generator would go on at night in some places, if you're lucky enough to have a generator, and you could power up something. They were limited by when it was available. So we're working towards having them be as empowered as any filmmaker throughout the world, because they can access internet, they can access electricity, solar power, whatever, and make their movies.
And then are you building up a specific film company or just the film industry in the Congo?
Well, ultimately it will be the film industry. We're working with one company, Bimpa Production, and that will then have offspring. The people who work with Chopin have already started their own film companies. Everything we do with Bimpa Production goes to help the other industries as well.
Tell me about... Go ahead. Oh, well,
there are about 25 little independent filmmakers in the Congo, but with very limited resources.
Got it. You were telling me before that there is no such thing as cinema, or there wasn't.
Right. Well, there still isn't. When they premiered Heart of Africa in Kinshasa, they used a cultural center, So they brought chairs in to seat the audience. They had a banner that looks like what you'd see at any film festival, advertising the film. They had the posters that Brandon Purdy had arranged for. And they had a really good audience. They had wanted the American star Brandon Olive to go to Congo, but he wasn't able to do that. But we are planning on taking Americans who can train the Congolese. There are some things that the Congolese simply can't do yet. We had to do all special effects here in the States because they don't, that training hasn't happened. You also have to consider the Chopper story. When the first time he even saw a movie was through a door on somebody's television. And he thought, I want to do that. I want to make movies. First time he was in a cinema was in his early 20s in Paris. So he had never seen one, and they had never been in a cinema. And they were telling him that the movie was over and he needed to go. And he said, please let me stay. This is my first time in a cinema. Let me just sit here and look.
Just take this in. Yeah.
Right. So he goes to National Institute of Arts, and they go around the rooms. What are you going to do with your degree from National Institute of Arts? He says, I want to be a filmmaker. And everybody laughs. And the professor, Elbas Manwana, laughs and points and says, you look to me like you're not a rich person. You kind of look like a poor person. You're poor, right? Yeah. Well, poor people can't make movies. The rich people make movies. That's not a realistic goal. So think again what you'd like to do, because that's not going to work.
That's not going to be it. Yeah.
Right. So he was selling cell phone cards at the time where you can, add minutes to your cell phone. Mm-hmm. And he had been given a television with a VHS, remember how we used to put the VHS tape?
Yeah.
Right, the television, and then the little slot where you put the VHS tape. So he had some videos of movies. So he started carrying the television to the institute. Every day he would carry the television with the videos, and he started the program. They would watch the movies, see what the director was doing, critique everything they saw. The only problem was because he was walking several kilometers with that television in his arm. He didn't have a car. So the students gathered money so that he could take a taxi because he was falling asleep carrying the television. So
Did he drop the TV at some point?
I don't think he ever dropped it, but they wanted him to not be so tired because he would fall asleep during class because he was so tired. So they gathered money to have him have a taxi. Then it goes to the point where he starts making a film, and a policeman comes up and asks what he's doing. And he says he's making a film that he's in the National Institute of Arts in Kinshasa. And they say, you don't have a permission to film certificate. And he's put in jail. And in jail, there's no way of getting to his family. He has no way of reaching anyone to say, I am in jail. He doesn't know how long he's going to be there. It could be a year, it could be 10 years. Somebody does help him and he's out within 3 days, but it's devastating. And for a while there, he thinks, I
can't do this.
I'm not going to do this. So for a few hours, he gives up and says to a friend, I'm going to find something else. And the friend says, Chopin, you've always been a filmmaker. Yes. That's all you've ever wanted to do. You can't give up. So he returns to the goal and makes a film called Mbote that is accepted, that it means hello in Lingala. And it wins Best Picture for the short film category in Belgium. And he's flown to Belgium to receive the award. We've got that on film. I can send you a YouTube of that, or you can just look it up, where these lights are all over the place, and they say, Chopin Kabambi, and he appears, he's kind of dazed and walks over. So that's 2014, where he's given a trophy.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then he continues making films, and he can't afford to go to other countries to the festivals, but he can send the videos. And he's winning Best Picture for his films. The first feature that he made was Heart of Africa. So when they showed it in the Cultural Center in Kinshasa, doing everything they could to make it into as close to a cinema as they could, it is a cultural statement that it says, we now have cinema in our country. And then we release it in the United States. Brandon Purdy of Purdy Distribution is in charge of the release, and he is so good at what he does. And I'm still in the States, they're still in Kinshasa, but I'm sending pictures of our key art, the large poster of Heart of Africa, next to Star Wars.
Right.
And so the young people there are accessing the photos on Facebook on their telephones, and they are messaging everybody. We look at us. We are next to Star Wars. This is us. This is the
we
Congo
made
right
it.
here. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a huge thing. It's huge. Theater that COVID, was this on theaters, but we've done what we wanted to do, or what God wanted us to do, I would say.
Yes.
We had hoped that we could financially start the industry. I think that won't happen. Well, not with this movie, but to plant a sense of you can do this, you can do this.
Right.
That was huge.
That is huge. And and I forget, with so many things in different countries in Africa, it just started. 2014, that it just started.
Yep.
Oh, this is amazing. And to have The Heart of Africa be his first feature film and to already do so well, that's, yeah. I've been on a lot of movie sets, or sets where, you're just shooting trailers, or, whatever it is, smaller projects. And sometimes you look and it's like, we're gonna be here forever. This is not a project that's got legs, right? And to think, wow, this guy he's made this film, and it's international. It's international.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful story. It is.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you resolved some of it before I watched it, because I need to know. So is there a place that, when will the general public be able to watch Heart of Africa?
Should be. We're now in July. It should be this month. We talked to Brandon yesterday about how Excel is coming with the DVD. We've got some special features on there. We have a lot of videos from the shooting of, where we've watched Chopin work in English and in French, because we've got an American actor there as well. And we have a message from Aimé Mbouyi about who he was and how he inspired and how he introduced me to Chopin. So I don't have an exact release date, but I understand it's this month.
Oh, that'll be nice. That will be nice. We'll be sure to let people know on this platform when that movie is available, because it was a great movie. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Then what is the goal for aside from fundraising, when are you wanting to start shooting for the Lumumba?
As part of our proposals, we have to give a date. And I think the date that we've settled on is March 2021 to start shooting. So everything needs to be prepared before then. We'll have to do some location scouting. We know how to get to Onaloa. It's not an easy trip where Lumumba was raised, because we want to film in his village. We want
boots on the ground for sure.
And it's a gorgeous area. I've not been to Onaloa, but I've been to the villages very nearby, and it's some of the most beautiful land on earth. So we want the spirit of Lumumba, of his entire childhood, is in that village. And we will have to take trucks for part of it. We know where the little airports will fly to, and then we take trucks and we know the equipment we need to take. So everything that we did when we filmed Chopin and his mother and the mother and her aunt, that was all teaching us how to do things in a community that doesn't have any electricity.
Yes. So you have that huge challenge in front of you, but it can be done. You've already got practice.
Yep.
That's nice. If people wanted to donate to your project or contact you to find ways to help and be a part of it, what would be the best way to find you? So
we have a foundation called Congo Rising, congorising.org. And we've got a lot on Lumumba and the Lumumba project at that website. We have the same website. If people can do fundraisers on Facebook for Congo Rising. I did one for my birthday, and all of that goes to Chopin for equipment. We know what we need and what we still don't have. And then you find out when you do filmmaking that it's not just having a nice camera, it's also having particular lenses, and lighting is such a huge thing. So he's purchased some lights while he's been here, large lights that they don't have there. So, we are tooling him for the future.
Yes.
Part of Africa was the kickoff. We're getting ready for the future.
So now that I'm thinking of infrastructure and I'm thinking of your huge cameras and lights, how do you run those?
Well, you have batteries that are rechargeable. So they are rechargeable by generator, but a solar system, that sounds nice, a solar system.
Yeah. Solar panels and such.
Yeah, but solar panels basically you just need to recharge the batteries. The lights are battery run, the cameras recharge batteries. So you just have to have a system of electricity. If you're in the field, you can't have a generator running or you can't hear things. So you've got to have solar. So we are working with the Ironwood Corporation to get that taken care of.
How many panels would you need? Do you know? For the size, no, panels, the solar panels.
Well, I do know. We're using solar generators, and we'll have 4 of those that can be built up. So you start with 4 generators and panels to go with those just as your initial power. But if you find that you need more, they're stackable. It's a new invention. The patent was applied for in September, but the fact that in a small little center, we can power an entire small village. Right now, we're looking to power the hospital in Loja. They were doing surgery by cell phone light because they didn't have at night. If there was an emergency surgery, they didn't have a way to light up the surgery. So somebody would hold the cell phone light and they would do it. They can't run the refrigerator. They're just little things that you wouldn't think about because we don't think about them. We go and everything's set up.
I think about them because I remember when I was a kid and I would visit Samoa with my mom. The electricity went off at 9. I know what that's like. I don't like it. I really enjoy electricity a lot. So, okay.
I could pay to have them go by diesel to fire up the generator.
Right.
And it was easy for me because I'm an American. It was $3 a liter. But that's actually
that's kind of expensive
for them. So,
yes.
And it's certainly not as inexpensive as a solar panel after you've paid for the equipment. But that was every night. The only way I could talk to my husband is if I had charge in my phone, because I could do that if my phone was charged. So I would pay $3 to the guy who was at the house, and he would go get the
liter
for the generator. Yeah. And that was the only way I could do things.
Will you end up, do you think, leaving that equipment? We
already did. That was already. No, we're not doing anything for ourselves. This is all.
Just take it, set it up, and let it be used.
We did it with all the film equipment that was always intended to be donated. So, everything that we took stayed there. With the solar equipment, that will be a permanent placement, both in Kinshasa for the film studio and in Loja for the hospital and the university. Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. So, if people want to help, they can find you. Again, give me the website.
CongoRising.org.
Perfect.
CongoRising.
.org. And is there any other place that you can be found?
Facebook. I'm trying to think. There's information on the Heart of Africa film on heartofafricafilm.com. That'll give information on, when the DVD comes out, any of that. Those are the 2 best places. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yes. So if you're watching and you want to be part of the project, you now have the information. That is so good. Thank you so much for sharing all of these. You are such a great storyteller. I'm like, oh, really? And then what they say? And then what? When you feel like you're listening to somebody else's conversation and you don't want to let them know because it's too juicy. Those are my favorite kind of storytelling experiences. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
This was a delight, Isabella.
Oh, thank you.